Hello, and welcome to Sustainable Outlook, a podcast from global law firm K&L Gates, where we discuss the transactions, technologies, and trends in the sustainable economy. We hope you enjoy this discussion. Please reach out with suggested topics or guests, or questions about how we can work together to create a sustainable economy.
Hi, and welcome to the show. This is Alyssa Moir. I'm a partner at K&L Gates in the Environmental and Energy Groups in our Seattle office. And I'm thrilled today to welcome and interview Sarah Aftergood. I'm going to give a little bit of an intro to Sarah, and then we'll just dive right into questions. Glad you're here, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. So Sarah is Orsted's Director of Environmental Permitting of Onshore Projects. She's based in Austin, Texas. Orsted is headquartered in Denmark. It develops, constructs, operates offshore and onshore wind farms, solar farms, energy storage facilities, renewable hydrogen, green fuels facilities, and bioenergy plants. Orsted is one of the world's most sustainable energy companies in Corporate Knights 2022, and it currently operates about a total capacity of 1.7 gigawatts of onshore wind farms in the U.S., and it's constructing more wind and solar projects in Texas, Nebraska, Alabama, and South Dakota. So I got to meet Sarah when she came to Seattle for a conference that we hosted on siting renewable energy on tribal lands. And then she graciously invited me to Austin to meet some more of her team, which was really fun. And it's just been great for us at K&L Gates to dig into the details of Orsted's projects, and then also on a broader scale, help them think through sustainability, biodiversity, and their ESG initiatives. So with that intro, let's get started. Sarah, can you tell us a little bit more about Orsted, maybe a little bit more detailed than I just introed, and your role there?
Yeah, so Orsted is a Danish renewable energy developer. They've been big in the offshore wind space in Europe, and they've expanded to the US and Asia. And in that, they've also expanded into onshore development. So onshore wind, solar farms, both in Europe and in the US. So the presence in the US is growing, and our portfolio is definitely getting bigger. So with that, I joined last year with the onshore group as the Director of Environmental Permitting to provide technical advice and direction to the development team to states that have more federal and state regulations. So before, we were pretty focused on states like Texas, Nebraska, Kansas, but we have really big build-out goals in the West and in the East, and definitely in states like North Dakota, Wyoming, Arizona, California. And all those states require permits and consider like higher level consideration of environmental factors. So I was brought in to kind of help with those and kind of just broaden our market reach in the US.
That's awesome. That's really exciting. I guess I didn't realize you were targeting all those different areas. And yes, based on experience, there are more permits and regulations to consider in those areas. So could you tell us, do you have kind of like a 3-minute synopsis about your pathway to where you are? Pretty exciting to be doing what you're doing. How did you get there?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I definitely have taken a bit of a weird roundabout way to get where I am. I would say the biggest thing was really early on in my career, I took a lot of risks. So I worked in a lot of remote places. I took positions in remote locations, which allowed me to take on more responsibility a lot younger. So I was given more like higher level roles at a younger age because I was willing to take job positions in areas where people may not want to be, for example. So I worked on a project for a while in Northern Canada. I lived in Northern England for a while. And so I just kind of put myself in those like uncomfortable positions. I went outside my comfort zone, knowing hopefully that gaining all of this experience early on would help me later on in life when I'm looking for more senior management. And I just kind of was like, how can I get as high as I can, as quick as I can? And so I knew working for a company, one of hundreds of employees in a big city, or one of 5 in a northern site in Northern Canada, I was probably going to learn a lot more and be given a lot more responsibility. So that's how I kind of started, is I started really remote. And then eventually over time, I realized that I really wanted to be in renewable energy. I really felt like that was the future of development. I thought that's where the big growth area was going. I wanted to be a part of the new exciting thing. And so about 5.5 years ago, I found myself in the US, got hired by a company, brought down to the US, and I've been building renewable energy projects ever since, and just working in really difficult states, getting projects done and networking and meeting people. And through that, as the industry grows and as new companies are formed and as people move on, I've kept really great relationships with people, and it has led me to this opportunity to be working with Orsted as the director. So, I just kind of really pushed myself when I was really young and just didn't stay in like a safe place of like I left home, I left Canada. I definitely took some risks and did sometimes some dangerous work. I used to work on like offshore fishing vessels, doing government regulation work. And so I definitely put myself sometimes at the face of certain adversity, but with that, I gained a lot. So I definitely don't regret it at all. So I definitely took like a different path, moved around a lot, was not very settled for a while. So it kind of just focused on career goals instead of, where do I want to live and like, buying a house. Those things I put to kind of the side to figure out like where I should be like in this world and what I should be doing.
That's so interesting. I don't think I've ever met anyone that decided I'm going to go, do this dangerous thing, or maybe not dangerous per se, but adventurous. And, realizing that that's an advantage from a career perspective. So that's really interesting. I didn't realize that was part of your thought process, but I love that idea. Plus it sounds, and I know from some of the stories we've shared over dinners and drinks, that you've had some pretty great adventures. So that's awesome too. To kind of build that into your career pathway as well. So it's great inspirational advice. I'm going to pass that on to my kids.
Yeah. I mean, there's been times where it definitely wasn't easy. I was in locations very remote on my own, siloed with people from the company, not always experiencing the most positive situations, but I always kept my head up and was like, this isn't forever. I don't need to live here forever. I don't need to do this. There's an ends to a means here. I'm accomplishing certain goals. I'm gaining certain things for my career, and I will move on because I'm too ambitious and too motivated to allow myself to be stuck in negative situations. And so there's always kind of like the good and the bad that can come with that. And so, I just always kept a really good support network around me so that I could get through those times.
So you're with Orsted now, headquartered in Denmark, ambitious goals. What are some of those high-level goals that Orsted has?
Yeah, so Orsted's big vision is a world that runs entirely on green energy. So Orsted now develops, constructs, and operates offshore and onshore wind farms, solar farms, green fuel facilities. And our goal is just to keep going, is to build more, move into new markets. For the longest time, Orsted offshore was really focused on fixed turbine technology. And in the last few years, we've moved full steam ahead into floating turbine technology, which opens up our markets huge into areas where floating is really the only option. For example, like California or countries like Spain, Portugal, Scotland, that now are moving full steam ahead with floating technology. Now we can get involved as well. So we are fully renewable. Our goals are renewable energy and investing in new technologies like hydrogen and more battery storage. So we're trying to just be the leaders. Orsted has continued to be the leader in a lot of ways in the offshore wind space. And now we want to be the leader in all the other different renewable energy spaces. So high level goal is to reduce the effects of climate change. We are big on addressing climate change and finding ways to reduce the impact and investing in green energy and just only focusing on green energy technologies.
So this question that it's almost the answer is obvious, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So why? What is driving Orsted's work, and what's driving your work for them? I do enough work in renewable energy that I feel like I can explain to my kids when they have climate change angst, because it's real for them. I'm working every day to try to make something better, even if it doesn't always feel like I'm moving the needle forward, trying to get there. And so for me, the why is, I guess, combating climate change for my kids. What's Orsted's why? What's your why?
I think Orsted's why, which is, I think you'll find a lot of companies' why, is market driven. So Orsted has invested so much in this market, and they've made it so that it's really great for investors, and they've been able to forge themselves that in these new markets, it's just become a great business model, and businesses want great business models. And so with that, because Orsted has been investing and going down this track and investors like it, it's good messaging for the company that we're investing in this way. It addresses so many issues of clean energy capacity. The costs keep coming down, the costs keep coming competitive. So I think Orsted has just decided, it's a great business model. We should just keep moving forward with it. And as we invest in more projects and generate financial gains, we can turn that around and invest in other technologies that we hope to see in the next 5-10 years become very viable in the market. So I think it's just, when you have if you have a business and you sell that one thing that everyone likes and it's showing to be good and it's showing to work for you, then it's like, that should be where our focus should be. Mm-hmm. As for me, I just like that you can build renewable energy projects and actually see them come to fruition, in a few years. You can work on something, see it get built. It builds energy to our grid. It helps with air quality issues. It doesn't use a lot of water. I really think water is like our most valuable resource. And so I like that we're focusing on things that don't use a lot. Coming from Canada, we're still, we're starting to invest in renewable energy, but it's still very much dominated by hydropower, oil and gas, some coal and mining. And as someone who is ambitious and as someone who likes to work hard and get things off the ground, having worked on some of those projects, they take a long time. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of development investment and then construction. I mean, I remember early on in my career, I worked briefly on a nuclear power plant, and just to do the assessments alone and get to a point of construction takes around 10-ish years. And then, it takes another 5 to 10 years to build the thing. You can build your career on one of those projects. I wanted to, once I got into renewable energy and went to construction and operated a wind farm in less than 3 years, wow. I was like, oh my gosh, this is way more my pace. I want to see things in my lifetime get built and operate and contribute positively to our world. And I think that's on top of everything else that we're doing. It's how can we get results now? How can we not delay things any further as temperatures go up and as governments do other things? What can we do today to accomplish real goals? And I just think, wind and solar energy is definitely one of those things. So I like the fast pacedness of the work environment. I like how quick we can get things going. The industry is also quite young, so there's a lot of energy. There's a lot of enthusiasm. There's a lot of new technologies happening all the time. Turbine suppliers are constantly making turbines bigger, better, faster. It's just like, it's the sunrise industry, and I'm super stoked to be a part of it.
That's awesome. That's so great. I want to pick up on a couple of key points that you made there. So I love that you described the fast pace, because I agree. Sometimes it feels slow because when you start with a greenfield project and you think, oh, this might not be operational, for four years, maybe, depending on permitting, environmental review, interconnection process, all of that, it feels like a long time in the future. But when you think about that compared to building a nuclear plant, a coal-fired facility, a hydropower dam. I mean, just in terms of timescale, it's very different. And then also, the end goals in some ways are different. We're working on renewable energy, something that we hope is a positive contribution to the future. And then the other point that you made about water, I do a lot of water work, and it's been interesting in the clean energy transition where we have particularly coal-fired power plants that needed a lot of water to produce coal-fired power. And as they shutter and shut down or change, there is water available now in ways that has never been available before. So for municipalities, staying in the river for fish, farmers and irrigators that maybe need more reliable supply. So that has been an interesting component too. And I appreciate that you brought that up in your industry, because it doesn't require as much water. There's some requirements here and there as you're building and for, washing solar panels, but it's a pretty different situation than a large coal-fired facility. So as you're doing this work, what does a typical month look like? And I think I explained as we talked about this podcast, I'm pretty sure your days and weeks are pretty different from each other, right? So I'm curious if you can tell us kind of what a month looks like or a week, but my sense is that a month might better capture kind of what it means to be the director of permitting for a company like Orsted.
Yeah, I mean, what makes my job so interesting is that no month is the same. I'm constantly working on different projects, and each project has different needs and different deliverables. And then I also am working on corporate policy stuff and how we streamline some of our requirements internally. And because I'm the director of environmental permitting, I have to be really in tune with environmental regulations and changes that are potentially happening on the federal level or the state level. So I would say in a given month, it's a mix of, what's happening big picture, what's changes that are happening right now in the US that I need to be aware of that's going to impact our projects. What projects need what? Are we heading towards a key milestone for a project? Do we need to go meet the community? Do we need to send in our permit application? Do we need to start spring fall survey work? And then of course working on like Orsted internal corporate goals, because Orsted now has big ambitions for mitigation and compensation of the environmental impact that we have at our sites. And so understanding what kind of programs there are out there for us to get involved in, what environmental NGOs we could be a part of. And so, yeah, it's very multifaceted. And every month some months I'm working a ton. And then some months I'm working, the steady 40 hours, and I relish in that. And, because I know it's going to pick up again. And so, even my workload just changes all the time. So it's just, some days I sit there and I have a week where I'm like, oh, things are pretty chill this week. Should be doing more. Then I'm like, no. In 2 weeks, you're going to be wishing back for the more relaxed week.
Quiet week. Yes, I understand that. Do you end up traveling to a number of your sites or traveling to a number of places where Orsted is looking to develop projects, or is that a role for somebody else on your team?
So we have a whole development team, and they own the projects, and I only go to sites if needed. So if we have a public hearing, it's been interesting with COVID, because usually before COVID, government agencies would meet in person, and now it's very much done remote. Some of them are moving back to original, like under the Biden administration, for example, BLM was relocated from DC out to Colorado. And now a lot of them are going back to DC. And so there's a lot of flux with COVID that's happened. Right now, like a lot of the government agencies are totally fine to keep things remote, but I'm slowly seeing some of the offices wanting to meet in person. So that's just we're kind of figuring that out right now. And then, right now I just go to like public hearings or maybe regulatory open houses, anything that has to do with the permit timeline. I will be involved in. And then we also sit on some boards. So Orsted Onshore is a partner with the Renewable Energy Wildlife Institute, and I sit on the board with them.
Cool.
And looks like we'll get back to doing some in-person meetings. So I will travel for those. And then, of course, conferences that occur. So it's not It's a decent amount of travel, and it's kind of as needed. But I'm certainly not traveling as much as our developers who are developing the projects, taking them to construction, need to meet with the landowners, need to meet with the county commissioners, form those relationships, be out in the field with the engineers and all that stuff.
So of all your projects, what has been, I think I'm going to ask kind of two questions in one. What's been the most challenging project that you've taken on? What did you learn from it? And then also, maybe what's been the most surprising or kind of thrilling part of your work, whether it's related to that project or something else?
I had to take a long time to think about this question because I don't know if I have a project that comes to the top of like the most challenging. I feel like anytime I've been put on a project that requires federal or state permitting, there's always been some sort of challenge. And each one has been so different. So I've worked on some projects where it's been like an external an external stakeholder group that randomly appeared in the middle of the process that now we need to deal with. I've worked on projects where, I worked on a project in Ohio and I had to go testify down at the Ohio legislature against House Bill 6 that was potentially coming through. And that was very much late stage in my project. We were trying to get the permits to head to construction. So I feel like in this industry, there's just always random things that come up, like Hail Marys that just show up and you've just got to deal with them. Or I worked on a project at one point where, the government wasn't quite sure they were trying to change the regulations halfway through the process. So you're like writing the permit but you haven't submitted it yet. So it's like, well, if they change the rules, then you've got to now amend your permit to the new rules. And so it's just, I feel like every project I've worked on has had some challenge one way or another. And I've always learned something from it. But because I've learned stuff from it, when those things happen on new projects, I've been here. I know how this goes. I know how we can go talk to the commission, work our way around this, hopefully, and hopefully have this not be a project killer. And I think that's just the art of permitting. Permitting is like this binary thing that you have to do, and you got to do it right, or else you could not get your permit, which means you can't build your project, which is obviously the biggest risk of all. And so, yeah, I would just say I've never worked on a project that's been like perfect, seamless, no issue. There's always been either an issue I've foreseen or an issue that came out of nowhere, or, or just something that we hadn't anticipated or we underestimated. And so now that I've had pretty decent experiences on some pretty big projects, I'm very cautious, with the permitting, respecting the permitting, the statutes, dealing with government agencies, listening to everyone and their concerns around the table, making sure those are integrated properly. And with when you're trying to build in new markets, I was the project manager for a offshore wind farm federal permit. The federal government is just trying to make it work. And they're trying to form regulations that work for developers, but also accomplish what they need to do under NEPA. And so it's a bit like, hopefully we're doing it right, but who knows, because this is a whole new area for everyone. And so, which is exciting, but also nerve-wracking, because it's not fun to be the guinea pig in a new permitting portfolio. So I've just gotten very good at talking to government regulators, understanding their mandates, and just trying to work with everyone. Because I think that's it, is everyone wants to work with one another and try to accomplish the same goals. So it's how can we all do that together so that we can get the permit approved and these projects built, so that there's more confidence in the market that these projects, that offshore wind will happen in the US. You need to give investors confidence that this is a viable market to invest in. And if you can't get the permits, that is a really big problem.
Right. Yeah, I really appreciate how you put that we're all working towards a greater goal here, right? Sometimes in the discussions, there's a little bit of debate or there's a little bit of conflict, but ultimately we're all trying to get to the same thing, which is, I think, what I like about being in this particular industry for sure. So what has been kind of the most thrilling part of your work, or thrilling or surprising, I guess? I'll give you the option. Is there something that you just didn't expect, or something that has just been like so incredible as you've kind of worked through the challenges?
I think the thing that I've enjoyed the most, that I can't say I ever thought would be a part of my life going through university, is working in these projects in super remote communities and working with farmers and fishermen and ranchers. And then one day I'm out in the field, like talking about corn yields. And then the next day I'm in the legislature or court defending our project or testifying as to why they should not allow this regulation to go through. So I think like that variety of dealing with different aspects of a project and kind of being the person that's out in the field and actually seeing what's going on, and then wearing a suit the next day and testifying in front of like a judge that we shouldn't do this shouldn't happen, you should allow this regulation to stay, is like, it's been really cool.
Yeah.
Like it just makes what I do like so real, like that we're having like a real impact, and I'm not just someone sitting behind a desk. I have real experience and I deal with people whose lives are really impacted sometimes by these projects. And yeah, just like boots on the ground. I don't know if I really saw that that's where this was all going, but I've really enjoyed it. There's just such a difference between like sitting at a desk and working away, and then just actually going out in the field and, seeing how farmers are impacted that season by bad crop yields, or how construction activities really impact their lands. And, so when we build these projects, it's just so much better when I can say, like, I know exactly what's going to happen here. I know exactly, how construction will impact your land. I know how this is going to go because I've seen it happen. And I can also see how the financial surplus that our projects bring into these communities, how they benefit them in the long run. We pay property taxes. We pay landowners to host these turbines. It creates a real impact. It's sort of, in some areas of the country, they're called a cash crop, because no matter how bad the weather is or crop yields are that year for soybeans or whatever, they're going to get a consistent income from our projects.
Okay, last question for you. So we call this podcast Sustainable Outlook because we're kind of, what's the outlook? What's around the corner? What's the cool new thing that we should be thinking about in 3 to 5 years? So as, a young leader in this industry, Sarah, what do you think we should be thinking about, or what are you going to be talking about in 3 to 5 years that's going to be cool, new, and exciting?
Oh man, this is a great question, because I feel like so many things could happen in the next 3 years. I mean, just thinking 3 years ago, where we are now. I mean, 3-4 years ago, we were doing some of the first offshore wind farm lease auctions off the coast of Massachusetts. And now we have like basically a whole sector out on the East Coast, and we're already talking about Louisiana and California. Mm-hmm. And that's only happened in such a short period of time. So, man, I think what we'll be talking about is, I think we're going to continue the discussion of storage. I think storage is only going to pick up in different types of batteries. And I think international relations with different companies and how we build these energy storage facilities, and what countries that we do agreements with, and how do we store our solar and onshore wind energy at peak hours to use them at night. And that's happening now. And I just think it's only going to continue and be like, as we put more and more money into this, it's just going to be sort of like the next step of how we make this industry a real qualifier for energy usage. I think we'll see how the, offshore wind, how that really goes in terms of floating out on the West Coast. So we know California is kind of happening. We'll see if Oregon kind of gets looped in there in the next few years or the next year. And I think transmission lines and where we start building more transmission lines and where we start building more projects and how we start using more public lands and possibly tribal lands to build these projects. I think that's going to happen the next year or two. I don't think it's going to be 3 to 5 years. But I think it's about new areas of development, new technologies, new markets, and more places that we can build in the US. And at least with Orsted's very much focused in the US. And so we'll see if in the next 3 to 5 years, if that expansion goes into other parts of North America. Not too sure yet, but our eyes are definitely on the US market for now. So I think just hearing about where the next trends are, I know Colombia is opening up to offshore wind lease areas. And so I think the discussion will be in the renewable energy realm is new technologies, new storage, cheaper panels, bigger turbines. And then for Orsted specifically is existing markets and where do we go with new markets and how we just kind of continue the spread of our projects.
That's great. That's a great kind of peephole into the future and really interesting to think about also like, wow, think about where we were 3 years ago and where we are today. I mean, it's really remarkable. So that's awesome. Well, I feel like I could talk to you forever. I'm so glad that we've got work and projects ahead of us to keep the conversation going, and maybe we'll have you back and we can talk more about what's happening. But just thanks so much for your time and just look forward to all of the good work and the stories that we've got ahead of us.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. Really cool idea that you're doing. And yeah, thank you so much for thinking of inviting me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainable Outlook. To listen to past episodes and receive notices for new episodes, subscribe by searching Hub Talks, that's HUB Talks, in your favorite podcast app. We hope you will tune in next time to learn more about the outlook of the burgeoning sustainable economy.